Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Just how much power and leverage will Deontay Wilder get from a win over Tyson Fury if in fact he beats the Gypsy King on December 1st? Can he parlay a victory into the sort of deal that he's going to be happy with to fight Anthony Joshua in that big undisputed fight we all want in Joshua's next fight, Wembley, April 2019? So the date and the venue, it's all locked in. But what's got me thinking about all this, and the points to come I might add, is some interesting comments that Wilder made to CBS Sports. So I'll get to those statements and then we'll take it from there. So he was asked directly about a Joshua fight, but specifically, how much negotiating help will he get from beating Fury? And his response, drum roll please, it's going crazy. They didn't want this fight to happen. They, the main people that didn't want this fight to happen, because they know how much power and leverage there's going to be after this fight. No matter who wins, you know, it's going to be a lot of power and leverage. They don't want me to fight him because they are making money just fighting, you know, anyone. And I'm not in their plans. I was never in their plans, but their plans are about to change real soon. Deontay Wilder's statements to CBS Sports. Certainly a bit to get into from all that, but it's the negotiating stuff that I'll pick up first, this whole power and leverage thing. We've heard Deontay Wilder and others associated with this fight claim that the winner will be the best heavyweight, the #1 heavyweight in the world, and Wilder himself has stated he'll be worth 60-40 in an Anthony Joshua fight because of this fight that he's in now. But he says he's willing to cut Joshua a break, give him a discount and do 50-50. And that's where he's currently at. And he said Joshua's promoter Eddie Hearn knows what it will take to make a deal. Whereas the other side, this is Eddie Hearn and co., they've offered an unknown percentage deal with a minimum guarantee and a rematch clause. But clearly it can't be worth 50%, otherwise this thing would have been sewn up by now, it would have been made. And it's likely the percentage is south of 40%, given that Hearn, he's thrown out publicly to Wilder that if they do 500,000 buys in the United States, he'll give Wilder 40%. So it stands to reason, whatever the offer is, it's less than 40%. It's probably similar to whatever Joseph Parker got when he put his WBO belt on the line in March. And that deal was somewhere between 30 and 35%. The actual percentage was never disclosed. But make no mistake, this fight getting made, it hinges on money. It always has. Both sides want as much as possible for themselves. But how the deal is cut and how much power and leverage Wilder has in these negotiations or upcoming negotiations should he win, it's going to come down to a few main factors. The performance itself against Fury being one of them. Say Wilder wins in emphatic fashion, he blasts Fury out in a few rounds. It's going to be very good for his cause because it will increase fan interest in him making that fight with Joshua immediately. That's what we all want to see anyway. But if he really does a number on Fury, then obviously everyone's going to be really wanting that fight. But at the other end of the scale, say he labours to a win or there's some controversy, or even if it's a dull sort of fight, arguably that may hinder his bargaining power to some extent, even if it's a small extent. But arguably the biggest thing that will influence how much power and leverage Wilder will have post December 1st in negotiations, that is of course if he wins, it's the pay-per-view buys in the United States. Wilder himself believes it will do 2.5 million buys. Very optimistic view there. Showtime shooting for a much lower range, a more conservative estimate, 200,000 to 600,000 buys, which Showtime's Stephen Espinoza says is pretty typical for a first pay-per-view. I mean, clearly the better it does, the more negotiating power it's going to give Team Wilder, and they're really establishing Wilder's commercial value with this event. But say, for example, it does somewhere in the middle of the Showtime range. It does 400,000 buys, for example. Well, that represents a pretty strong event in the American pay-per-view market right now. I mean, who's doing big numbers at pay-per-view? Not many guys. There's not many guys on pay-per-view, full stop. At $65 a pop for the pay-per-view, that would represent about $26 million in revenue. But with the $65, you have to factor in that's just a standard definition price. So if you add another $10 on top for HD, well, a few more million roll in the door. So at 400,000 buys, you could be looking at the best part of $30 million in pay-per-view revenue. But bear in mind, that's aside from the live gate, the international pay-per-view money, sponsorship, merchandise, and any other revenue streams. And they will also all add up. So there's going to be some big money involved with this fight. But even at the lower end of the forecast, say, for example, this does 200,000 buys, the event is still going to be making money for those involved. But clearly, the better it does, the more money is made. And the more that increases Deontay Wilder's power and leverage in negotiations. But it would be worth noting at this point, in terms of these targets that Eddie Hearn has thrown out, so 500,000 buys in the US will get Wilder 40% of the pot with Joshua. If it does 1 million buys, then Hearn will give him 50%. It is worth remembering, these are just Hearn's negotiating parameters. They are not set in stone. I think there has been a bit of, fans have taken this as these are the set in stone targets, but it's a negotiation after all. So Hearn's, targets are really just starting points. No one has agreed to these from the other side. So I could well see a situation where the pay-per-view, for example, does somewhere in the Showtime forecast, and Wilder still says, I'm worth 50%. He might get 400,000 or 500,000 buys and go, give me 50%. There's a high possibility, whatever the number is, he's still going to say, I want 50%. But if the nature of the win, if that's emphatic, the pay-per-view does reasonably well, and thirdly, Wilder's popularity and profile continues to be on the up and up and up, what is that actually worth in terms of what he should get in a fight with Joshua? Is it 30%, 40%, 50%? We have to remember both sides are going to be driving an extremely hard bargain. We've seen it already this year. I mean, both sides were crying about the other and what the other was demanding and so on and so forth. But another thing to toss in here, if Wilder beats Fury, then he will have the lineal champion status. What's that worth? Surely it's got to be worth something, at least for marketing purposes. Anthony Joshua has also made no secret of his desire to fight Deontay Wilder in an undisputed fight. He said on record it's the only fight that he wants next. And recently he said on his social media he will become the undisputed champion in 2019. So while everyone wants to try keep as much of the cake as possible, we have to remember that there is two sides to making a fight. So Joshua and Hearn, they may well have to give up a bigger percentage split than they would otherwise want to, just to make the fight. They probably feel they're already giving, in their offer that they've made, more than they feel Deontay Wilder is worth. But after all, an undisputed fight, it can't be made without the WBC belt. And Wilder knows this. It's already part of his existing power and leverage that he has to get a deal done. He can deny Joshua the opportunity of that fight, deny him the opportunity to add to his legacy. If he doesn't like the deal, he can just walk away. And that very may well happen. And it would be easy to say, well, they should be doing 50-50, they're both champions and etc. and so forth, but unfortunately it often doesn't work like that. Post December 1st, depending on how it all goes, Wilder could either be in a much stronger position than he has been, or he could be much in the same position of not having enough commercial clout to get what he wants for a deal. But even then, he may still say, give me 50%. But I would actually rather see this event do really well, because that probably makes it easier to get a deal done. But who knows? I mean, first, Wilder, he has to get the win. That's not guaranteed. But if he does get a win, he's got to look good. And if he crushes the pay-per-view, well, that's good for his sake. It probably makes a deal easier to hammer out. The other part of Deontay Wilder's statement from earlier that I wanted to pick up on was the part where he said, they don't want me to fight him because they're making money just fighting, anyone. I guess there's three things there, and I'll go through them really quickly. Depending on who you support, probably depends on whether you believe Joshua wants to fight Wilder. Also, the bit about making money fighting anyone, well, that probably shows where Joshua's commercial value is and Wilder's is. There's a commercial divide between the two and has been for some time. But the bit about fighting anyone as opposed to him, that's the bit that really caught my attention and I wanted to dig into. Because I've noticed there seems to be a concerted effort from some boxing fans to make out like Anthony Joshua has been fighting, just guys off the street, no one of note, which clearly is nonsense. Sure, it wasn't the Wilder fight most wanted when he fought Joseph Parker or when he fought Alexander Povetkin, but both guys were top guys in the division when Joshua fought them. Parker was an undefeated champion, and Povetkin has one of the deepest resumes in the division. He's been one of the best guys in the division for the past decade. So this whole narrative that Joshua has just been fighting anyone or fighting nobodies, it's ludicrous. I would note, Parker and Wilder's team were in discussions about a unification fight in 2017. But as Kevin Barry stated, that's Parker's trainer, he said publicly there wasn't enough money in it. So Wilder was looking to face the same guy that Joshua did. And also, Wilder thought that Parker beat Joshua. And he also messaged Parker afterwards, and this is according to Parker, saying that he'd give Parker a fight if he could. So when you consider all that, Parker can clearly not just be anyone. Also, Wilder nearly fought Povetkin back in 2016. That fight was scuppered after Povetkin had trace amounts of PEDs found in the system. But that fight, if people forgot, was going to be the biggest of Wilder's career until that point. He would have gotten a massive amount of credit for beating one of the best contenders in the division, in Russia no less. But now apparently the same guy also falls into the anyone bracket. If Wilder had both Povetkin and Parker on his record, he'd be talking those wins up. He would. He'd be saying how good of opponents they were, how they had, added to his legacy and such, just as he does for his other championship wins. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up here, but let's hope, should Deontay Wilder beat Tyson Fury on December 1st, and there's no guarantees there, but if he does, let's hope the Joshua fight happens. Because I don't know about you, but I want to see what is surely now the biggest fight in boxing, sooner rather than later. But maybe because it is so big now, maybe it will be stretched out even further. But, generally the fans are the ones that always come off second best in this, so let's hope for the best and expect the worst. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.